Good morning, YouTube. Casual Tommy. Another video on my way to work. I'll get a quick wristwatch check. I'm wearing my beautiful SKX 009 again. If you've watched enough of my videos in a row, you'll notice that I do attempt to wear the same watch every day throughout the work week. Not the same watch every week, but I will try to. If I wear an SKX on Monday, it's likely I'll be wearing it on Friday. I do that to try to build a better relationship with my watches, to build more experiences, to get to know them better. I found in the early days of my collecting, I was wearing a different watch every day. That was what I tried to do. And then I realised I'd pick up a watch and think, I've barely worn this watch. So I try to wear them a few days in a row to at least get to know them a bit better. So what's this video about today? Well, I want to discuss some regrets and lessons that I've learned over this decade of watch collecting. I guess it's worth mentioning I don't necessarily see regrets as a negative thing. Regrets are just lessons you haven't learned from yet. Regrets quickly turn into lessons. If you have the ability to self-reflect, which you should, because if you don't, this hobby will cost you a fortune and you'll end up broke. But yeah, you can learn from your regrets, and they turn into lessons. They turn into teachings, things that you can share, things that you can help other people learn from. You grow from regrets. A regret will grow into a lesson. I've had many regrets and lessons over this decade, more than I could poke a stick at. And I guess the format I want to convey this in will be in short videos with a few regrets each video, rather than one 30-minute video. I'm still finding my feet with the format of how I want to release my videos. I'm trying to think of ways that I can increase the quality, so if you have any suggestions, please let me know. So let's get into it. What's the first lesson I've learned? Or the first regret? I'll start with a very common one that a lot of people experience, which is the allure of fashion brands, recognizable brands. When you're only first getting into the hobby of watch collecting and the study of horology, well, horology in itself is a study, you don't know too many watch brands, right? You're only just getting into it. I think I knew what Seiko and Casio were, and Rolex obviously, but that was not within my budget at the time. But I definitely knew what Armani was, and Louis Vuitton, and Hugo Boss, and Guess, and all these fashion brands. So, in the early days, you have a difficulty distinguishing between what's a watch brand and what's a fashion brand, and where the true value lies and what separates the two. That was something that I experienced in the beginning. I first bought a Seiko 5, and then quickly went on to Armani and Calvin Klein and all of that junk, really, to be honest. It's not to say that I regret them, or I regret those experiences, because those were the stepping stones. That was the pathway that led me to where I am today, which isn't anywhere too far, to be fair. But it is at least my journey and my experience, which I do not regret. Some of the issues with the fashion brands is that there's no true value to them. Those watches are expensive without value. That is a bit of a contradictory statement, but a true fan of horology understands what I mean. There's a lot more to value than price. Not to mention that they lose all of their monetary value as soon as you put them on your wrist and walk out the store. You'll quickly realise that they didn't even have any monetary value when they were in the store. So I guess, yeah, there's no true value to them. They have no horological significance. They have no collectability. They are junk. They're all the same, really. They have the same cheap Chinese quartz movements in them. Maybe one will have a Japanese quartz. That's all that you can find out about the movements, because there is no further depth to the thought of the design and the quality. The quality of these watches are very poor. I took a legitimate Emporio Armani watch into a watchmaker to get a new battery put in, and he said this is fake, and it wasn't fake. It just had the same quality. It just had the same quality of movement inside it as a fake, which is just mind-boggling to me. It really, really was. It was insane. I bought it from a legitimate, we'll call it an authorized dealer, but really it's just a jewelry store that sold Emporio Armani watches, and the quality of their watches were no different to true fakes. So that was definitely a kick in the teeth. They have no resale value. You cannot resell them. I ended up gifting them, and I ended up either gifting them or throwing them in the bin. I gifted them in the early days when I still thought they had some kind of value. But now I look back on that and I was just giving people some turds. So that's very unfortunate. And I don't do it no longer anymore. I would just, if I were to happen upon another fashion branded watch that I would like, another fashion watch, I would just throw it in the bin, like I have recently. I guess you could say they're all show, no go. They look the part, but there's nothing, there's no substance to them. Another lesson I've learned: in-house versus ETA, Myoda, Sellita. ETA, so I should say in-house versus factory mass-produced. There was a point where I thought that the goal was to get in-house movements. That's where you wanted to build up to. That was the goal. I've quickly learned that was wrong. Not for everybody. I think unless you have the money to sustain an in-house collection, then they're just not worth it, really. Unless you want to, over your lifetime, spend the amount of a Rolex on servicing those watches, you're best to stick with ETA, with just popular movement brands, movements that all watchmakers know how to service. That's something that I learned the hard way. The cost of servicing an in-house movement is extreme, 3 times the amount compared to getting a 2824 serviced, something like that. It limits the amount of watchmakers that will actually touch your piece, unless they have experience with this particular in-house movements. I found that a few watchmakers in my area wouldn't even touch them, so I would have to then go to premium watchmakers, which charged a premium price. It had me, after having a service done on an in-house movement, I ended up babying the watch from there on. I was so afraid to wear it properly, so I ended up selling it at a loss, plus the loss of servicing it. It was a terrible experience, but there was definitely a lesson to be learnt out of that. I guess another regret that I've experienced would be the trends in larger sizes of watches. So, especially when you're dealing with fashion brands in the beginning, they make predominantly larger watches. I think that's a lot to do with the popularity of the Daniel Wellingtons of the world, is because they are actually coming back to more traditional sizings, which people do want. People do appreciate that. The preppy private school kids seem to just love those Daniel Wellingtons, and I think it's because they do have a level of refinement aesthetically, which really is just a minimalist look with a small watch and thin watch bands. I think that there is a lot of value to owning smaller watches. If you can actually break that barrier, the versatility with what you wear is quite good, right? Rather than, I mean, I say this while I'm wearing my SKX, which is one of the larger watches I own, and it is quite versatile because of its casual styling, I guess you could say. But typically the larger watches, they're your weekender watches. If you try to wear them to work or anything like that, they end up just looking cheap, in my opinion. Another value point as far as smaller watches is concerned is the price points. If you're looking for a vintage Rolex and you want a 41mm, well, not even vintage. If you're looking for a Rolex and you're looking at the 41 mils, you're looking at a few thousand more than if you're able to step it back and get yourself a 36. So your point of entry is quite cheaper in the luxury world if you are able to and happy to wear a smaller watch, which I sure as hell am. One point to mention is that smaller watches draw less attention, less of the wrong attention. So I was in New York, in some dodgy places in New York recently for a holiday, and I felt much more secure wearing a vintage Omega than I did my SKX. I knew that even though my vintage Omega is worth 4 times the price of the SKX, maybe 5 even, it went under the radar a lot easier than a big gaudy watch on my wrist that would have a high perceived value just based off the size of it and the attention that it draws, the negative attention. Smaller watches attract the right attention, vintage watch fans and the like. I guess the other thing that I've learnt about smaller watches is that they're not a trend. Now that I've watched the trend come back towards smaller watches, unless you're Hamilton, I mean, God, even AP are making smaller watches now. Even Hublot are making smaller watches. It's awesome to see. So I guess they are a timeless design. Smaller watches are a timeless trend, but not even a trend. That makes it not a trend. That makes it a fashion staple rather than a trend. So yeah, I guess those are the first 3 points that I'm going to mention. I'm going to be staging these videos out over the week while I reflect and really assess what would be the top 10 or 11 or 12, I don't really care, regrets / lessons that I've learnt across this journey. So please share below, comment, subscribe, like, and let me know what your regrets are, what you've learnt the hard way. So yeah, please share your thoughts, and I'll catch you in the next one.